I'm Angela Kerndl, and this is True Crime Rocket Science.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello from Kissimmee, Florida, and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this analysis, we're going to talk about the legal black hole at the center of the MORPHEW case. It's also a sort of evidentiary black hole. When the autopsy report came out, it was both surprising and perplexing. Surprising because somehow chemical compounds were preserved inside SUZANNE MORPHEW's dusty bones, despite spending 3 years outside in the elements. But before it seems like the tranquilizer compound found makes the case a slam dunk, we have to look at what the autopsy report also acknowledges it doesn't know. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So the autopsy report acknowledges something it doesn't know. What is that? It can't say what the cause of death was. Is this a problem? Now you might think this is a small legal hurdle within the schema of evidence, within everything that we know, all that circumstantial evidence. But consider the Casey Anthony case, and I'm in Casey Anthony territory at the moment. That's a case that also involved skeletal remains, and it also left prosecutors uncertain about the key question: how did the little girl die? This was the weak spot in the Anthony case, and the defense filled in that blank quite cleverly. And Casey, the most hated mother in America at the time, walked away a free woman. Could the same happen to whoever is charged in SUZANNE's murder? Could the same happen? Absolutely. Now, imagine if you were the prosecution and you had come up with a scenario in terms of the cause of death. What would it be? In the SUZANNE MORPHEW case, what would be your cause of death? If you had to stand up in front of a jury, what would you say happened here? Well, there are essentially three possibilities, three basic possibilities. One is that Barry's version is true, that SUZANNE went cycling, someone shot her with a dart and then later again with a bullet, essentially that she was abducted, taken from the scene. And this idea that she was shot with a bullet is based around evidence, because a weathered round was found near her remains. The second scenario is that SUZANNE was tranquilized and then strangled, and the bullet is staged just as the clothing likely is and just as the bicycle likely was. If you think about the MORPHEW residence, it is not that far from another residence and the whole area is fairly silent, so a gunshot would be something that would likely be audible. Was a gunshot heard by any of the neighbors? The third scenario is that SUZANNE was tranquilized, but not enough to kill her, and then tranquilized again with a lethal dose, and one sufficient, a dose large enough to remain in her bones. This final scenario also explains why so much chemical was present in her bones to begin with. Of those three scenarios, which one is the most likely? Which one is the most believable? Can one choose one of those scenarios over the other beyond reasonable doubt? The problem with skeletal remains is that there's very little evidence to work with, and also that we have no cause of death. And you might think manner of death, homicide, is sufficient, but juries want to know that there's certainty about exactly what happened and how and when it happened. In this case, there's a lot of uncertainty in all of these areas: when, what, and how. We don't even know how Suzanne's body got to Moffat, or when that happened either. Now, you might say there are a few cases where cause of death was unknown and juries still convicted the suspect, such as Kelsey Bereth, whose remains were burned to ash. But in that case, an accessory came forward and told the jury, as part of a plea deal, a plea deal that the district attorney at the time described as a deal with the devil. I wrote a book about that case called Murder Most Foul. In any event, this accessory came forward and told the jury in grisly detail just how Patrick Frazee killed poor Kelsey in the lounge of a Woodland Park home. And when they tore up the floorboards, the investigators found evidence of what exactly the accessory was talking about. Or you might refer to the children of Laurie Vallow, who was one was burned and another was found wrapped in plastic bags. The cause of death for Tylee Ryan is by unspecified means, same as Suzanne Morphew. But I think it's reasonable to infer that she was shot, then that's because of circumstantial evidence, including a shot that was heard and a suspect texting that he'd shot a raccoon on the same day. In any event, the words from the autopsy read, Tylee Ryan's death was homicide by unspecified means. In JJ's case, his autopsy and cause of death in terms of Goth Warren revealed that the 7-year-old died of asphyxiation caused by a plastic bag taped over his head. Now, while I agree with the asphyxiation aspect, I don't agree with the rest of that. What do you say? I strongly disagree with JJ's cause of death, certainly an aspect of it. Just because he was found with a plastic bag wrapped around his body doesn't mean that's a murder weapon. Now, in theory, a strong defense could seize on this certainty by the prosecution and undermine their case, because they don't have to prove what happened, just to prove that the prosecution's case is full of holes. And it's in this cause of death area where there is this big hole. Now, that happened in the Casey Anthony trial, and unfortunately for the suspects, in the Vallow case, the murder tally of 3, 4, possibly even more, made it very easy to convict in that case. In Suzanne Morphew's case, prosecutors will have to be on their A game. They've let this case slip through their fingers once, and although they've gained additional valuable evidence, there's still the cause of death, also the time of death, and also who disposed of her body, that gives the imputed perpetrator some wiggle room. At this point, we don't even have a situation where charges have been filed against anyone. In any event, I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.